Well, today we're going to talk a little bit about AWS storage and why storage important. Well, at the end of the day, all the data in the cloud, everywhere, all the images that we create, all the music that we create for the silent discos, all of that's stored somewhere in the cloud, and it is the cloud, but under the covers, right? There's storage, and it's more than storage. And storage, I've been with AWS. I run our storage go-to-market. As we peel back the layers of what we offer for data storage through AWS, you'll see, hopefully, and come away with a few nuggets of ways to optimize costs in storage, scale, and get the performance out of the cloud and get the flexibility as well as developing insights. So let's take the journey and talk a little bit about the different kind of customers first that are using AWS storage today. First of all, 90%, I want to say 90% of our roadmap that we'll review today, and the huge announcements, the 134 announcements that we made last year, 90% of that roadmap comes from our customers. So I just wanted to say thank you to the millions of customers that have been using AWS and AWS storage for over 15 years. And here's just a few of the large ones. You recognize some of the logos, probably recognize yourselves, and I just want to say a big thank you. Secondly, we have partners. So whether you're talking about data in the cloud and you want to get data into the cloud and help with that, we have consulting partners to protect your data in the cloud, to migrate your data across the board, or analytics, machine learning partners across the board. We have AWS storage partners that can help you protect, migrate, and get insights from your data in the cloud, and then consulting partners to help you get it there and also help scale your business while you've got your data in the cloud. So let's just talk about, and again, this session's about storage, but really this session is about data. And data is really the lifeblood of every single business because without data, you can't get insights and use some of the advanced services like machine learning and analytics to get those insights. So let's talk a little bit about the exponential. I think all of you have seen, the IDC reports and the amount of data. But I've been around the block a little bit, and I still remember the days of storing music, going back to the music analogy, on vinyl, right? And then we had CDs, and we had the first iPods, and think about that. And this just accelerated, right? So in the enterprise, in particular, IDC report last year, where they had a report called "Organizations Relying on Cloud Storage." Basically, 3x of enterprise data stored in organizations, the data is going to grow 3 times, and 87% of enterprise data will be stored in the cloud in 2025. So that's just a few short years away. So with all this data, there's challenges, but there's opportunities, right? So first, when you think about the challenges and you think about on-premises storage and then moving that to the cloud, you have to think about your data generally, and we deal a lot with customers that are moving data into the cloud. And they might have had departmental arrays, they might have had different applications spread around, and what they see is when they migrate to the cloud that there's a challenge to consolidate that data. So that's how do you rationalize that, how do you move it, and then how do you provide access once it's in the cloud. The nature of the digital economy also adds risk because there's that, again, protecting the data and making sure that, that you have the data and you have the right access to the right people, and you have business continuity to make sure that that continues. And then finally, though, I think the biggest thing is you have opportunity. And the opportunity is really to drive value and leapfrog competition to bring your data to life through advanced services. So let's talk a little bit about how customers are using the cloud and moving data into the cloud, as well as building applications in the cloud. So first, a lot of that growth comes from, really, if you think about it, 2 areas. Either A, customers are born in the cloud customers. They've built many of the startups that you've come to know and love have built and have been born and have grown in the cloud, and there's exponential growth there. Secondly, there's also in the cloud itself new applications really built on the cloud first and using advanced capabilities and thinking about serverless, thinking about really new architectures in the cloud first. Secondly, we have a lot of customers that are migrating existing applications. So a lot of the data historically in enterprises, you've got applications and application growth, everything from compliant applications for healthcare all the way to databases. And so what we see is customers are moving applications by application. And then finally, also, we're beginning to see customers moving all into the cloud and moving their entire on-premises, their data centers, shutting down data centers and moving all of that into the cloud. So with those two, let me highlight a few customers that have made the journey either digital native, cloud native, or have migrated into the cloud. First, you might recognize the logo here. The NFL. So NFL has built something they call their digital athlete platform, which generates a computer simulation for different scenarios within the game. And it really helps the NFL better understand how to treat and rehabilitate injuries that might occur on the field. And so we worked together, and NFL worked with AWS to take an initial library of about 10,000 labeled helmet images and apply Sage and put that into S3 and then apply SageMaker to it to analyze, and really with the goal of predicting and intervening to prevent future injuries. So that initial 10,000 has now grown to 20x. There's about 200,000 helmet images and about 10,000 unique play videos now as part of that archive. And again, every day they're using this to deliver real-time intervention and treatment of players in the game itself. So real-time impact with the NFL. A second example of how customers are using data and storage in the cloud and some of the underlying capabilities that we have is J&J, Johnson & Johnson. They have a data science platform for genomics, neuroscience, R&D, and drug discovery. And so what they did is they used Amazon's EKS and EFS to analyze genomic sequencing data and COVID data to support various sequencing and support their various therapeutic areas. So with this combination of EKS and Amazon EFS, or Elastic File, and they also we introduced something called EFS One Zone, which is a single availability zone version of One Zone. So using that, they first reduced their analytics time by 35% compared to what they were doing before. And then secondly, because of the One Zone, because of the single availability zone and optimization, we'll talk a little bit more about different ways that you can use some of our tiering and optimization capabilities, but they saved 37% using lifecycle management and One Zone to lower their storage costs. So another example, this is pretty cool, and something, I've been with Amazon for about 6.5 years, and many of you know some of the core solutions, core storage solutions that we have, like S3, EC2. Over the last 5 years, we really introduced a lot of new capabilities for customers in that second category that we talked about. So we really, for the early history, the first 10 years of AWS, we focused on customers who were born in the cloud, cloud native, so using storage classes like S3, and then introducing Glacier, EBS, et cetera. But what we saw was an opportunity to work with customers to say, hey, how can you easily and friction-free move what you have today in the applications that you have today, in the environments that you're using today, into the cloud? So we started to introduce something, a platform that we call Amazon FSx. We'll talk a little bit about that later. But New South Wales is a great example of how we're helping customers that have existing application environments just easily and friction-free move into the cloud. So New South Wales had a medical imaging repository. They started there. It was running on NetApp. Some of you might be familiar with NetApp. And we introduced last fall, so last September, we launched FSx for NetApp ONTAP. And because it's just really easy to move data, in fact, they could just replicate data, say SnapMirror, into the cloud. They moved 1.3 petabytes of on-premises imaging data into the cloud easily, and now we're able to use the same application, same access patterns, same administration that they did on-premises. So again, easy, friction-free for those customers used to running on-premises. The second thing, now they're looking at, now with that easy move, they're looking at their clinical, their patient administration, clinical database, and also genomics analysis, and using two other FSx services. First of all, Windows, which is a completely fully managed Windows environment and Windows sharing environment in the cloud. And then Amazon FSx for Lustre, where we introduced some new capabilities as well to increase performance and lower costs at reInvent last year. And that's for high performance file access for the genomics sequencing. And finally, Finra. So Finra is the regulatory industry authority overseeing the US stock securities and bank dealers. And what they're focused on is capturing all the data from all transactions to make sure that they're monitored for insider trading. So that's the data. They had a number of different, I worked with them pretty closely a few years ago, and they had a number of on-premises solutions, silos of different analytics applications and on-premises analytics and siloed data lakes, if you will, and then move that into a consolidated data lake in AWS. So today, what they originally forecast was they'd get maybe to 250 petabytes within 7 years. What happened? They moved all the data and all the transaction data, consolidated it, and all the real-time data grew to 250 petabytes within 1 year. So they basically exceeded their 7-year growth within the first year. And we stored it on AWS S3. And again, I think there it goes to really the scalability and the ability for customers to have that flexibility in the cloud, like Finra, no matter what the world is going to throw at you. And there's certainly been a lot of uncertainty in the world the last few years. So at a high level, we can think about data and data storage. And what's common with all these customers is really using data architecture to deliver capabilities and making sure that it's always protected. They make their data work for them so they can make better and faster decisions. They design their data architecture so it's cost optimized, and they want to make sure that the data is available where and when they need it. So let's kind of pick apart now each one of these. And I know this is a high level, so hopefully, and this is, we want to dive a little bit deeper into some of the capabilities that you can take away and to think about in some of the follow-on sessions that we have. So think about this session as this is, if you will, the menu, and maybe hopefully you'll get at least 2 or 3 nuggets of information for your hour of time that you spent here. And then you can dive deeper in some of the chalk talks and some of the other areas that we have throughout the rest of the week. So first of all, the AWS storage portfolio has grown. And at the beginning, back at the dawn of time, S3 was one of our first services and just celebrated its 16th birthday, actually, about a month ago on Pi Day. And so at the beginning was S3, EBS, EC2, and that was cloud storage. And so what we've done is over the last 16 years now, we've really expanded the portfolio to include the most complete set of cloud storage services. So regardless of any application, any performance characteristic, we have the deepest data services in the cloud. We also have a number of capabilities to protect your data, to move your data. So we have AWS Backup we'll get into, transfer family, capabilities like data services to move and optimize. And then finally, for customers either operating in a hybrid environment or wanting to move their data into the cloud efficiently, we offer a variety of hybrid and edge and storage and data movement services to allow our customers to do that. So this will be a little bit of an eye chart, and it's intentional because last year in 2021, we launched 134 new services and features in storage alone. And so if you want, I can slow it down, but there's just a lot here. I was talking to the people who put together that we were working through the slides, and I said, no, just let's look at the pace of innovation last year, again, with 90% of these capabilities driven by what our customers were asking for. So some of the things that we launched last year were FSx for NetApp, which is one of the fastest growing file services that we've had in the history of AWS. Again, because we saw pent-up demand for customers who had on-premises NetApp environments. We announced new storage classes like I mentioned earlier, EFS OneZone, which is a single availability version of our highly scalable, high elastic file system for AWS. And again, it was multi-AZ. Some customers really wanted to have it in a single AZ for a lower cost for cost optimization reasons. And finally, Private Link for S3, which we can talk about allowing capability and access, unique access characteristics to S3 to all the data that's been moved in, especially for data lakes. And then I want to drill into one other interesting, and we'll go into it in a little bit, something called multi-region access points. So these are some things, we just announced so much. I don't know about you, but I find I work at AWS, and I find that I'm overwhelmed by the pace of innovation. So I want to pick out a few of these things to have you dive deeper. I talked to a customer last week, and we talked, for example, about they were having some problems on access controls for their S3 buckets, and basically they were running out of space. This might be familiar to you within the 20K limit to their bucket policies. And so what we did is we talked to the customer, and we said, "Hey, have you thought about access points?" And the customer said, I haven't heard about access points. And so we went through access points, and what we delivered was basically virtually unlimited. Again, there are 1,000, I think, access points, but it's a soft limit. So if you have higher levels of access points or finer grained controls that you need, you can talk and you can lift those limits. But again, we have these new capabilities, I think, that just, we're just innovating so quickly that customers aren't keeping up to speed, and certainly I even have times where I have a hard time keeping up to speed with all the innovation. So that's where hopefully you'll get a little taste of it today. That's what these sessions are for, and dive deeper with some of the other chalk talks that we have. And also, we always have specialists and experts available to help you in your area here in San Francisco and around the world. So last year, we delivered 134 releases, more than any other cloud provider, and these are GA releases of new capabilities. It says 15 years of innovation. We just clicked over on Pi Day of this year. It's 16 years for S3, which is really at the same time that AWS was started. So one of the things I talked about was customers moving that second category. First, again, we have cloud native, people that are born, bred, companies that are just built in the cloud. But we have a lot of customers that are currently on premises today. And I come from 20 plus years of storage. And so we talk to customers who are running and managing their storage infrastructure and data infrastructure today on premises. And what they said was, well, you know, I'm very comfortable with my environments, but I really don't know much about the cloud, but I want to bridge it. My company is moving very quickly into the cloud. So I want to get certified. I want to get up to speed very quickly. And while we had capabilities, we had some education on cloud storage, we really didn't have a path for those customers who wanted to bridge from their on-premises background, their different certifications that they had in their on-premises days, to moving that to the cloud. And so to instill confidence and help those customers move to the cloud, we launched at reInvent last year, we launched this idea of cloud storage learning badges. So it's on its path to certification. It's not quite a certification yet. We're on a trajectory there for roadmap for certification. What we did is we launched a series of badges, which then can be placed on LinkedIn and other social media, and again, just like other certifications. And it's a very, in fact, the feedback we got was a lot of the specialists in our own storage organization had a hard time going through and achieving these badges. So in January of this year, we launched object and block storage badges. And then through the rest of this year, we're going to be launching file, data protection recovery, and data migration badges. So these are available now. The first two are available now. I encourage you to go to our learning and development site, and you can actually go through, take the courses, and then take the badges and have the badges. And really, I think certainly you can promote them on your own social media site, but just for the learning itself, for Learn and Be Curious, I think it's a great new capability that we're offering for our customers to bridge that gap from on-premises into the cloud. So let's pick apart a little bit, and I'm hoping that we want to make sure that you get something out of this session today, that it's not just death by PowerPoint. So hopefully, again, we'll go through and I'll try to highlight little nuggets as we go through here for things that you can take away. Even if it's one thing, hopefully it's worth your 1 hour of time again this morning. So first, we think about security, and security is job one. And so if we look at and there's, as I said, 134 new capabilities last year that we launched. What we want to do in this session is just highlight a couple of the things that we think are the most relevant to customers, either A, building applications natively in the cloud or migrating into the cloud. And security is the foundation. So first, what we announced a couple capabilities, new capabilities for EFS. We announced AWS IAM authorization for EFS. Basically, that's the only file system in the cloud where you can use IAM policies to manage access to system data. So that allows you to manage multi-tenant environments in a cloud-native way super securely. Another tip, if you haven't done this yet, do it now. Go back to your office, or if you have your laptops here, do it here. Turn on Amazon S3 block public access, because this is something that we introduced a couple of years ago, but this is a best practice. Just make sure that your buckets, your block public access is turned on. We offered something that was actually kind of a duh that people have been asking for years, real simple. And now and we track these statistics internally, one of the most widely adopted capabilities we introduced late last year, which was disable Amazon S3 access control, or ACLs. So that allows you to basically rely only on IAM policies for access control, which most people do anyway. But you can just, with one click now, disable ACLs on your S3 buckets. So that's something as well. If you haven't done it and you're not using ACLs and you're using IAM, you should run, don't walk, and do that today. And then we have introduced something, basically the ability to encrypt everything by default. So again, some people were doing this, most people were, as a best practice, encrypting their data, but now we have an opportunity to just encrypt it by default, and that should be a standard setting unless you have a reason not to do that. And then what you can do is we are really focused on helping customers manage and understand and develop insights into where there might be areas, especially in security, but also cost optimization. So if you haven't played around with S3 Storage Lens yet, please do that. Inventory came out a few years ago. That will also show which objects are encrypted, which ones are not encrypted. S3 Storage Lens is a really cool capability. There's a free tier. Play with it. We're evolving it and adding additional capabilities over time, but it provides you overviews of things, not just of what's encrypted and what's not, but also areas where you might want to optimize or might be benefits for cost optimization as well. So it's a really cool reporting and lens, if you will, into your data sets to make sure that you're doing the right things around security and cost optimization. And then finally, auditing and monitoring for everybody, not just those in compliant environments. We have a number of capabilities like storage lens metrics, as we mentioned, and those are available to be exported into CloudWatch. We have file access auditing for FSX. That's especially useful for customers in regulated industries. There's something that you may or may not be familiar with is something called object lock. And object lock is basically, you can set a retention period on an object so that it can't be deleted or modified for a period of time. And it's not just useful for, say, regulated like PACS or financial services where there might be a 7-year duration required for that, but also just think about if you have data that you don't want to have accidentally or maliciously deleted or modified, you can use S3 Object Lock. For many applications, we work a lot with media customers, for example. That's their crown jewels. If the data isn't changing, use Object Lock to protect that data to make sure that it's not deleted or modified. And then finally, just a few months ago, we announced some enhancements to checksums for integrity checking. This, again, was especially useful for media customers, but it really applies to any customer. We have new capabilities and new algorithms in checksumming that increases the ability to check and to make sure that objects are valid and increases the performance by up to 90% for checksumming. So we had customers who were uploading objects, large objects before, say, 50 gig files, and then checksumming, and it might take hours to go through those files. We'll reduce it down by 90%. So that's some new capabilities that we just introduced and just launched. So if you're dealing with large files and you want to make sure you're doing checksumming on it, we've introduced some new capabilities for that as well. So let's talk a little bit about, now that we started with foundation and security, let's talk about data protection, which is related, but we introduced some new capabilities here as well. So I don't know about you, but sometimes people accidentally delete things, and so certainly, and those of you that are used to PC or Mac environments, you have basically the recover and undelete. Well, so we included now a new capability within EBS snapshots called Recycle Bin. So you can keep, and it'll automatically keep accidentally deleted snapshots for a retention period, and then you can recover the deleted snapshots before your retention period expires. And so anything in that recycle bin is going to be charged at the same rate as regular snapshots, but you have that additional safety blanket now of saying, whoops, it got deleted, and you can now undelete it and recover it. So a capability that didn't exist, and also one of our fastest growing services, is AWS Backup. So AWS Backup, if you haven't heard about it, is pretty clear. Whoop, hang on. Just as I was on a roll this morning, it's the first session of the day. There we go. Did that to make sure you're all paying attention. So it's because it's dead quiet and I can't hear anything. So, okay, I heard somebody laugh, so that's good. People are paying attention. So AWS Backup's a new capability that we introduced. It's a cloud native backup. We also introduced some new capabilities at reInvent last year for VMware. We'll talk through that. Basically, it's a comprehensive backup solution for the cloud across all, and we'll go through across now 12 native applications. So really there's a couple cornerstones of this. It's really, we want to simplify data protection. So we had snapshots, great. We have S3 versioning and replication. We had different capabilities for DynamoDB, for RDS, et cetera. So, so what we had was an amalgamation of different data protection capabilities. What we heard from customers is that they wanted to have a single pane of glass for simplicity, for all that data protection. Secondly, for compliance, so that a lot of customers have a data protection or a compliance officer that they want to make sure they're audited to make sure the data is protected. And then also cost optimization, just making sure, we see, I don't know about you, but I've seen a lot of customers that do snapshots and they have a lot of different extra storage that they're using, say, hey, that's great, store more data, but if you're not using it and you don't need to, well, then cost optimize it by making sure that you're storing and backing up what you need for the period of time that you need. So what AWS Backup is this single pane of glass that we introduced just a few years ago and has been a rocket ship in terms of adoption that provides basically it has native backup capabilities for things like our file storage, so like for EFS, but also offers more of a control plane for your backup for all the other backup services. So what we have is, for example, block storage for EBS. You can have a policy-based management for snapshots. You can have a single view of that. You can have a single pane of glass for all your file storage, for your databases. And then at reInvent last year, we introduced also a backup for S3. So like, why would you want to use backup with S3? I've got, replication, I've got versioning. So a lot of the cloud native customers were like, well, we're already doing backup, and through the lens of you're developing for S3, I have something for that. Well, if you flip it around and think, hey, I'm a enterprise that's moved many applications, of which a portion of that data, say, resides in S3, another piece resides, say, in a database somewhere, another piece resides on a file system, and I want a single pane of glass across all of that. Great, AWS Backup now can back up all with policies across all those different application types. So I think about it, and I was talking to the backup PM teams, really thinking about different personas. If you're a developer focused on S3 and you want to make sure your data is protected, there are a lot of native capabilities, like we talked about, object lock, versioning, etc., replication, that you can leverage from that lens. However, if you're looking across multiple applications where S3 and other services are one of many, and you want that single pane of glass, AWS Backup is the right approach. So again, it's an and, not an or, but again, I encourage you to look, if you haven't looked at AWS Backup. What's new is we introduced capability for hybrid workloads, VMware and AWS Storage Gateway, so they can protect their VMware workloads on-prem. So it's not just in the cloud, we've extended that to on-premises as well. So that's backup. The other piece, and I've talked a little bit about this, is replication. So AWS S3, Amazon S3, has had replication for a number of years, really, since pretty much close to the beginning of S3. We have multi-region, and then we introduced same region replication, and then we introduced additional capabilities to improve RTO and RPO with new capabilities for replication over the last few years as well within S3. But one thing super interesting, and again, what I said is at the beginning, is maybe there are a couple nuggets. This is one nugget you should think about. We introduced something called S3 Multi-Region Access Points, or MRAP for short. Just rolls off the tongue, I know, but MRAP, which accelerate multi-region applications. And so what does this mean? Basically, you can replicate, but then what we'll do is, say you're accessing from outside AWS and you're trying to find the closest bucket to access, and you have the same data in two different buckets. What we'll do is automatically direct, based on latency and on other metrics, that request to the closest, lowest latency bucket. So what you'll have is now the ability to improve performance and just have one single access point to be able to, and not have to deal with the complexity of being able to redirect the traffic yourself. So for customers that want either resiliency and or performance for multi-region applications, MRAP is a super interesting solution that we introduced last year that you should definitely take a look at. So for FSx ONTAP, what I mentioned is we launched ONTAP last year, and so there's one-to-one, one-to-many replication capability within now that solution. And again, NetApp is known for SnapMirror and its replication capabilities. Now that just nicely fits into that environment, whether it's on-premises to the cloud or between regions. And then finally, we introduced Amazon EFS replication across region or in the same region so that you can keep a copy of your file systems and meet your recovery point objectives. So lots of replication. So first backup, and then obviously replication, whether it's for data resiliency or for performance, as in the case of MRAP. Okay, so we talked a little bit about security. We talked about protecting your data. Now let's talk a little bit about putting the data to work. And so kind of if we double click on this a little bit, we think about one of the key use cases of Amazon S3 is data lakes. And I know that's kind of a comprehensive catch-all bucket, pun intended, for a lot of different applications, data applications. But what customers are doing, again, the definition is really taking all the different data sets, combining that into one large pool in one bucket or many buckets, but then providing different fine-grained access controls to that data based on the application requirements. So today, hundreds of thousands of data lakes run on AWS, and S3 holds more than 200 trillion objects and averages over 100 million requests, around 200 trillion objects. To kind of give a sense of what that is, that would be somewhere around 26,000 objects per person on Earth. So that's how much data, how many objects are being stored in AWS today, and 100 million requests per second. So I know for those of you, I might have spent time on the phone with you about TPS and and being able to make sure that we support high performance access. And in the old days, what we used to do is do prefix optimizations and do all of that. Well, think about the performance of 100 million requests per second across all of S3, and it kind of gives you a couple data points, if you will, of the kind of scale that we're achieving with our customers and helping our customers. So that's the kind of performance and scale piece of it. The opposite side of it is, okay, well, great, wow, this data is exploding. This is, look at my bill, and my bill's going up every month because I'm storing all this data. So what do I do? Well, we have saved more than 250 million, customers have saved more than $250 million using capabilities like Amazon S3 Intelligent Tiering. If you are not using, we introduced S3 Intelligent Tiering about 2 years ago. And in that period of time, basically the comparison is if they would have stored it on S3 standard and they just would have left it there, we automatically tier it, and we'll go through that for customers, automatically saving those customers in aggregate $250 million on their bills, because we'll move it when the data gets colder. So we also introduced around the security area at reInvent some new capabilities around lake formations. And again, for data lakes, lake formation is the ability to provide secure access and policies to people who need it when they need it. So we announced new row and cell level security to restrict access in your data to data lake tables, to specific columns in certain rows. And then we also include transactions for governed tables, providing full atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability, or ACID. And again, I'm not a data lake or analytics expert, but ACID sounds like a really great acronym. But again, it provides really that governed table consistency, isolation, and durability. So you've got security as well as the durability aspects within the data lakes, which are the underpinnings. And again, what we see is there are a lot of capabilities that are being built into S3, because these have a symbiotic relationship that are required at security and governance for these different data lakes and different analytics applications to access. So some of the innovations that we've introduced over the last year, again, if you're deploying a data lake into AWS, first of all, we include private link, and that private link for S3, and then if you couple that with data sync, basically we can move data from your HDFS on-premises cluster into the cloud easily and securely. We also offer, for customers, we offer the capability to automatically synchronize data between FSx file systems. So if you need a POSIX compliant file system and you want to store your data in S3, but you really want that POSIX compliance and really high performance, low latency, and that's what your application desires, we'll synchronize between those for those applications that require it automatically. And then finally, we introduced S3 event notifications integrated with Event Bridge, and then S3 event notifications with Lifecycle, so you can react to changes in storage class deletion right away using automation. So a lot of capabilities for data lakes that we introduced at the foundational level. My favorite area is cost optimization, because it's like the first company I think that I've ever worked at, AWS is, where one of our missions and one of my day one jobs and the entire team's job is to help customers optimize costs, right? Because we realize customers' data is growing, data sets are growing, so we're constantly looking at and saying, hey, how can we help customers optimize their costs? In my case, how do we help them optimize their storage costs? So let me talk a little bit about how and the way to think about some areas that you can think about if you're not doing it today. And in fact, there's some new capabilities introduced at reInvent that based on what we've seen, that not everybody's taking advantage of yet. So we have seen, so we want to make sure that that people are available or are aware of all these capabilities that are available. So if you think about it, and this is for those of you that have been around data for a long time, most data is not hot, right? It's the tip of the iceberg, right? Archive data isn't necessarily, there's a difference between backup and archive. Backup data is hopefully data that you don't ever need to use. Archive data is just not in use at this moment in time. So it's still really important, but you're just not using it. And so our philosophy and what we heard from customers is like, well, I don't want to pay a lot to keep all of that storage, all that data in a super hot tier. So what we did is we had S3 standard. It used to be just called S3, then we renamed it to S3 standard because we introduced S3 standard infrequent access. Then we introduced another tier called Glacier, and then we introduced Glacier Deep Archive. And then at reInvent last year, we introduced Glacier Instant Retrievals, or GIR. I love these acronyms, MRAP, GIR, they just roll off the tongue. But again, these are some of the things that we talk about with customers that we use nomenclature for. So GIR, or Glacier Instant Retrieval, is a really cool new capability and a new class of service that we introduced for customers who have that archive data. They don't want to spend a lot on storing that data, but they need that instant capability, the instant retrieval, milliseconds. So what we introduced, so if you think about before, the before was we had S3 infrequent access, Glacier, and then we introduced Glacier Deep Archive. We've introduced this new class, which kind of sits between infrequent access and Glacier, and offers you that same, if you will, cost profile. So it's 0.4 of a cent per month, and 90 days, which is the same as Glacier. But instead of having that asynchronous access that you get with Glacier, it's synchronous, meaning it's instant millisecond access. And so what we did at the same time, because we said, oh great, well we had S3 instant retrievals that we introduced, and we had formerly known as Glacier. Well, we can't, and the price is the same. Well, we have to first of all offer our customers some differentiation and value, so for storing it in more of an asynchronous tier. So we dropped the price of Glacier and renamed it to Glacier Flexible Retrievals. We dropped it by 10% to 3.6 of a cent per gig per month. And then Glacier, if you recall, is an asynchronous tier, and there's really three options. You put the data in, you got to keep it for 90 days, and you can either just get it in back within 3 to 5 hours. If you're, say, scanning or doing, say, large transcodes for a media company, maybe bulk retrieval, 5 to 12 hours, it costs less. And expedited, you want to get it back super fast. So that's super fast, still isn't instant like GIR, but it's expedited. So within a few minutes, you can get the data back. What we did for customers, especially for things like disaster recovery use cases, so we hear a lot about ransomware recovery where people want to get the data back in but don't want to spend a lot of money. So what we did is we also, at the same time of dropping the price to 3.6 of a cent, bulk retrievals now, that 5 to 12 hour retrieval, are free within the Glacier Flexible Retrieval class. So for those use cases where you don't need the instant access and you want to be able to pull back that bulk data just when you need it, in the case of, say, a disaster, or you're doing, say, a large transcode, bulk retrievals are free. So it's a great class for those kinds of use cases for disaster recovery. And then finally, we have Glacier Deep Archive, which is the most cost-effective storage on the planet in the cloud. So it's less than $1 per terabyte per gig per month. And we have both standard and bulk retrievals for that class as well. So I kind of did that. I'm going to look at it and give you a little different view on how all the stuff hangs together. So we've got S3 standard, we have S3 infrequent access, we have instant retrievals, we have flexible retrievals, and we have deep archive. And I skipped one called Intelligent Tiering because I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that. But basically, we have one way to move between these different classes is something that we call lifecycle. So basically, you can create your data, you can create a lifecycle policy, and then after 90 days, you say, okay, great, you want to move it to this new archive class called instant retrievals because you want to be able to access the data instantly still, but it's colder, so maybe 99% of the time you're not going to access it, but that 1% you need it instantly because your application needs it that way. Or a lot of what we heard from customers are like digital asset management applications, PACS applications, etc. The data's super cold, but They don't have a tolerance for latency. They just want to be able to pull the data back quickly. So Glacier Instant Retrieval is perfect for that. But then say over time, say after a few, say a year or two, or in this case, in this example, after 180 days, you really want to cost optimize. So you're paying 0.4 cents at instant retrieval, but you no longer need, say it's PAX images or older images that just don't need that instant retrieval anymore, but you need it maybe for compliance reason. So after 180 days, you move it to Glacier Deep Archive, and that's now going to be less than $1 per terabyte in cost optimize. And then say you're in a regulated industry, say financial services, where you have to keep data around because of SEC requirements for 7 years, then after that period of time, the data can be deleted. So that's how all these things hang together using lifecycle policies. The other way to do it is the easy button. So we introduced intelligent tiering a few years ago, and what we did is at the same time that we introduced Glacier Instant Retrievals, S3 Glacier Instant Retrievals, we introduced the third box here, which is that archive instant access tier. And so what we can do now is customers can put data in, and after 30 days, the data will automatically move to the infrequent access tier. And then after another 60 days, it'll move to the archive instant access tier. And from an application and API perspective, this is all transparent. And what we saw is when we launched, we launched on December 1st, plus or minus, of last year, right around reInvent, and we immediately looked at customers' data sets, and then that data moved to, we saved customers millions of dollars instantly across S3 as they moved to that archive instant access tier. So you can save up to 68% with this new archive instance. If you're not using intelligent tiering, there's really no reason not to. We've also removed some of the other limitations that we had. We had some announcements around costs associated with object monitoring, other things that we reduced the last year. So really, I think about S3 intelligent tiering should, for most applications, be your default class of storage. And now with the inclusion of archive instant access tier, you can save 68%, and you don't have to do a single thing. You don't have to worry about lifecycle policies. I got to move faster because the guy next to me is done already, so we'll go ahead. So think about this as if you know your access patterns, then you probably can use lifecycle management. If you know that your data is going to be cold after 90 days and then going to be colder, you're probably going to be able to, also customers who use, say, digital asset management systems or other applications, they really know their lifecycle better, use either lifecycle policy or have that application do the tiering directly into things like Glacier Instant Retrieval or Flexible Retrieval or Deep Archive. But if you don't know, then use basically the intelligent tiering. As I said, it's the easy button to automatically move the data. So basically, we fundamentally changed the economics with Glacier Deep Archive and allowing customers to now store that data at less than a terabyte per month. And now we've fundamentally changed how people archive their data and put it to work. So we've talked a lot about S3. We talked about object storage. There's also cost optimizations and archive capabilities that we've introduced now on the EBS side. So we introduced, how many of you use EBS snapshots? I assume everybody does, I hope. So basically, data's stored at 1.25 cents per gig compared to 5 cents per gig in the standard tier, so it's 75% cost savings for the archive tier for EBS. It eliminates third-party software for archiving, which I know a lot of you use, and it's super easy to use. So again, offering customers value and a lot of savings for EBS customers today. So again, if you're using EBS snapshots and you want to keep them around for a longer period of time, don't need that immediate access, use the archive tier. On the file side, so we talked about object with S3, we talked about EBS. On the file side, we also have a lot of capabilities that offer customers lower cost and cost optimization. So first of all, I think I mentioned this earlier, we introduced EFS One Zone, a single availability zone that will reduce storage costs by up to 47% as compared to EFS regional storage classes. Secondly, we offered, and again, you'll see a trend here of intelligent tiering and automatic tiering. We offer EFS Intelligent Tiering, automatically optimizing costs for shared file storage. And again, there, we've seen customers save up to 92% by using intelligent tiering with EFS. Then with FSX, we have, and we can just one click, offer compression and deduplication. So that's going to save customers 50 to 65%. So hopefully we talked about security, we talked about protection, we talked about optimization, and now data. Let's talk about getting data and the kinds of data, getting it available, making applications easier to use and higher performance in the cloud. So at EBS, we introduced, actually in July of 2020, we introduced Ebs Io2bx, or IO2 Block Express. And this is something basically every single day EBS is driving trillions of IOs and has exabytes of storage. The new capability with Ebs Io2bx really was for those customers that really wanted that higher performance, so 256,000 IOPS in a single in a single volume, and then sub-millisecond latency. So if you think about the combination also, when you combine R5B with instance type with EBS, this is really designed for those super high performance, low latency applications, sub-millisecond latency applications. And again, I think customers tried to get there by doing different things. For example, taking different volumes, aggregating them, using instant storage. What this allows you to do is just ease of management and scalability in a single volume. And we've called it SAN-like performance in the cloud for OLTP workloads like SQL, Oracle, and SAP HANA. So really exciting about Io2bx with some great adoption for these super high performance mission critical workloads. We worked with a third party called Principal Technologies, and what they did is they benchmarked with a synthetic I/O workload, and what they saw was that we saw 26% better throughput and better TCO with than on-premises equivalents using IO2 Block Express with R5B compared to a mid-level NVMe array, and that's actually linked on our website and was conducted in November 2021. So again, you can always, with performance and benchmarking, there's always different levers, but if you think about high performance, low latency applications, equivalent or better than what you can get on premises today, think about Io2bx. And Salesforce is a good example, who moved their MongoDB to Io2bx, and they saved, and basically they dramatically improved their durability for MongoDB. And then Acoustic moved their SQL-based workloads also to EBS, and basically offering better performance during peak periods and lowered license costs because the application runs faster on fewer cores. So think about capabilities there, just performance, but also cost optimization as well. So we're going to finish up here with some thoughts on FSX. So FSX is something that didn't exist 5 years ago, 3 years ago. So we introduced a number of capabilities. And what's FSX? FSX, think about, is a control plane. So the way I like to think about it is, for those of you that know RDS, which is our management platform, our fully managed platform for databases, this is RDS for file systems. So it's a fully managed infrastructure to be able to easily, one click, be able to deploy formerly really complicated file systems like Lustre. I was actually talking to somebody yesterday who was a Gluster and Lustre on-premises administrator and talked about all the knobs that you need to dial to just get the open source version going. And then the care and feeding of that is just a monstrosity. And then, God forbid, something happens to that person who set it up, then basically nobody knows how to figure it out, how to keep it running. I mean, that's the reality of on-premises Lustre and Gluster. It works, it's like a finely tuned, high-performance car. When it works really well, but when it doesn't, watch out. And so what we did is we took all that complexity out of the way, and we introduced FSX for Lustre a few years ago. And then what we did is, this last year, right before reInvent, we introduced a new capability, and that we took Lustre and we moved it and now run it on Graviton. So what this allows us to do is improve performance on Lustre by up to 5x, and then also get up to 1 terabyte per second of throughput. So what does this mean? It means for high performance HPC applications, genomic sequencing. We have a lot of customers for things like autonomous vehicle modeling, machine learning, really that high performance, 5x the current generation, 60% lower cost of throughput. And then, as I said earlier, you can automatically link that. So a design pattern that we see a lot is customers store their data in S3, pull it out, run it, and then spit out the results back into S3. ONTAP. Again, very easy to use, super excited about this, also in the partnership with NetApp. This is a fully native first-party service. We offer a managed solution for NetApp, basically, that allows customers for the first time to just take what they're doing today on premises and easily migrate into the cloud. And then you might not have seen this sneaking in right at the end of the year at reInvent, we offer FSx for Open Zfs. So again, this basically there's tons of organizations that rely on ZFS if you're familiar with it in open source. Again, here it runs on Amazon AWS Graviton, and it delivers up to 1 million IOPS with latencies of just a few hundred milliseconds. So again, if you don't need, you just want core capabilities, you want a POSIX compliant file system. It's the popular Open Zfs file system, and if you have data intensive analytic workloads, machine learning, financial analytics, especially in financial services, we see a lot of adoption there where they're very comfortable with this, and they don't need all the bells and whistles of say a Windows or other packaged file system. So we realize that customers are also managing environments in hybrid. So you're in the cloud. You can also run applications on premises and use AWS Storage Gateway to, if you will, write data and then tier to the cloud. AWS Outpost actually run in a hybrid environment. Remote office situations, you can also run applications and mount an NFS mount point or an SMB mount point and access your data and store that data in AWS. And then we also offer edge devices like Snowball Edge and Snowcone that are can be completely decoupled and not online. So the mental model here, if you think about it, is what and how are you operating in a hybrid environment if you are? Are you online or offline? If you're online, you can use capabilities like Gateway, as I talked about, to tier. And if you want to just consistently keep data synchronized, say between on-premises and the cloud, you can use AWS Data Sync to do that as well. Offline, Snowcone and Snowball basically can be completely decoupled for environments that, say, we see a lot of customers who are in everything from ships to aircraft to mining operations, using these devices with very limited bandwidth, but they want processing and storage capabilities locally, but in an offline environment. So kind of bringing a couple of these worlds together, we took Gateway. We have what looks and smells like a VTL library, for those of you that are familiar with backup software. So VTL Gateway software integrated that into Snowball. And basically now we have the capability to say you're in a decoupled environment or you have limited bandwidth, you want to write and use your existing backup software, and you want to write it out. You could do this with Storage Gateway before, and then it would automatically move it and tier it to AWS. But now we have the same idea, but you basically write it to a Snowball, and then periodically ship those Snowballs to the cloud. So this eliminates, especially where you have decoupled environments or limited bandwidth, you can do that, and you can migrate petabytes, if you will, of backup data into the cloud using existing workflows. So hopefully you've learned a few nuggets, and if you haven't picked up a few nuggets, I'm just going to recap some of the best practices. And I saw some of you taking pictures. Take a picture of this one, because these are probably the 10 things you should think about. If you haven't done, you should think about doing in terms of security, cost optimization, and performance, and to think about over the next 6 months as you think about expanding your infrastructure. First of all, encrypt everything. You can encrypt it by default. Turn on the block public access. That should be something that everybody does. Disable S3 access control or ACLs. That is something that we saw skyrocketing. It's just like yep, duh, everybody should be doing that if you're not using ACLs. Use AWS Backup to centralize data protection policies. That's something, again, if you have that view across multiple applications, want that single control plane, that single pane of glass. And then Backup Audit Manager for applications or environments where you want to be able to make sure that there's inspection and auditing for compliance reasons of those backup environments. And then for an optimization side, use Intelligent Tiering as the default class for S3. If you're not using it today, just do it. Unless there's probably maybe some wacky corner case use cases where Intelligent Tiering shouldn't be the default, but those are far and few. And I'll challenge you after the session maybe to come up and talk about your application. But I would say in almost every situation, Intelligent Tiering should be your default class for S3. Use Intelligent Tiering for EFS and for FSx ONTAP. Data and compression and deduplication capabilities are built into FSx. Use it to optimize your costs. Use Io2 Express for those IO intensive workloads, high performance, low latency, and then make sure that you're taking EBS snapshots for mission critical data using the optimizations that we talked about, including the accidental deletion, the recycle bin, and EBS snapshot archive to lower costs there. S3 lens to get insights into your organization-wide storage usage. That's super useful. We've got a free tier, and again, provides insights into security, compliance, and cost that you should just be using today. And then finally, use S3 access points in application and hardware. So access points, for those of you that are developing data lakes or are running into issues with security and control policies on your S3 buckets, this is a great way to kind of just really blow out and really have fine, persona-based access to your data and objects contained in S3 without the complication of S3 bucket policies and without the limitations of S3 bucket policies. So with that, we're going to give you a few minutes back. I didn't finish up quite as quickly as my neighbor here, but I will give you a few minutes back. Please, please, please go and learn and be curious. Go to AWS Skill Builder. You're going to be able to access 500 free digital courses there. And certifications, foundational, associate, professional, and specialty certifications. While we don't have a certification yet for storage, we do have the storage badges. That's the storage technologist badges that we talked about. Block and object are available today, and we'll have file, data protection, and migrations available through the course of 2022. So with that, I really thank you for your time. I do want to also, and I have to look at my sheet here to make sure that I'm everybody's paying attention. Please, please look at the following courses. There's an EBS Chalk Talk. There's a data migration builders session. There's a file breakout session. There's an S3 breakout session. There's an S3, and then there's an AWS backup breakout session as well. That will go deep and deeper on each one of these topics. So hopefully I've whet your appetite a little bit today, provided enough, and it wasn't just death by PowerPoint, and you've taken a few nuggets here today, and I really thank you for your time. So thank you, and have a good rest of your show.